this Vivisection of your coverage.
Yeah.
A Blair Fish character.
Okay, so we have a third host today, namely me again, my clone, presenting images. This probably won't be the last time these images are shown, because I reckon I'll probably present them again to be flamed for my lighting. But today we're focusing on coverage because it's been on my mind lately. I'm obsessed with coverage. I'm very paranoid in that regard. My marked up scripts are horrible to look at because there are at least 3 or 4 shots that cover most of the entire scene. You know, the first day on this production looked at it and went, wow, terrible. I normally cut down on set. My number one question is, what should my priorities be when thinking of coverage? Like, how should I be ordering it? How should I be fashioning it? And I'll show you examples of what my coverage was for a library scene that I shot, my most recent one. See what you think. There's a few stylistic choices there, but like...
Again, I potentially hear multiple questions in the one, so we might need to unwrap a few of them. And I'm also kind of hearing asking the questions backwards.
All right.
And the reason I'm saying that, a lot of what we've been doing, I think, has been asking the how before we've asked the why.
Right. I can give you my why, if that helps.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, I can try at least. The way that I covered the shot, the way that I shot the short that I'm doing right now had a lot of influences in like comedy movies that I like, stylistically. Like, I'm a big fan of Terry Gilliam's look, so that was a bit of that was in there. It isn't as obvious in this coverage. A lot of what you're seeing here is a lot more of a Big Lebowski look. Shots that kind of cover everything, largely 2 shots that linger for a while, but a lot of them to cover different things and different moments, basically. So my intention was for the coverage to be served by the performances. You know, I want what's happening on screen to be interesting enough that I can stay on a shot. And I was shooting it with like imbuing myself with confidence, saying, I don't need a billion different shots. I actually need these nice looking ones, or these okay looking ones that the audience are happy to watch for a while these characters do things. You know, I could occasionally convince myself that it was a lazy way of shooting, but when I watched movies like The Big Lebowski, where there's about a minute's worth of like one shot, but what's happening on screen is so funny that you don't care, even though it's just 2 guys sitting in front of a camera, right? Anyway, that was my general why. That was kind of my philosophy, if that makes sense.
Okay. I want to take it back a step further when it comes to the why. And that is, why coverage?
You need your sequence of events to be covered. You need the contents of your script to be filmed, and coverage is the way that you... the way I do it is I write my shot list and then I mark up my script to know what shots can cover which part of the script. My coverage overlaps a lot deliberately. That's why, you know, it's in the name, it's coverage. It covers the events of the script, you know?
And why different shots? I'm not saying like for this particular scene, not for this particular short film, but in general, I guess, a bit more philosophically, why different shots?
You want more to work with. You want more for the editor to use to, you know, the director and the editor need more to work with so they know which shots work better for certain moments, you know. If you shoot 2 shots of coverage of one conversation, one medium shot and one close-up, the director can cut to a close-up on a more intense or intimate moment of the conversation, and the medium shot when things die down or become more disconnected. Like you need more to work with.
Right. So if we try and summarize that, make ourselves, again, as we did with how to choose a fixture, a list of priorities, a list of questions to ask ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I'll type it down this time.
Narratively, we want different shots because we want to emphasize different moments. So in that regard, narratively, emotionally, if there is no new information, then why change the shot? Does that make sense?
I get what you mean.
Mm-hmm. The other big consideration is CYA.
Right.
It's called coverage because it covers your ass.
Yeah, and that was my primary philosophy with that, was I was covering my ass the whole time.
So I think tricky part to designing good coverage is to kind of mesh and make the two parameters work in tandem.
Mm.
So you want to have the coverage to cover your ass, but you don't want to cover your ass without a narrative purpose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think my number one concern with my coverage was that it was too utilitarian. Too much of it was covering my ass. I found in hindsight that there were actually a lot of shots there that kind of worked in terms of that, like very, very basic, what I was talking about with the pushing further in for different moments. I also used different focal lengths, different distances to make people feel disconnected. And also, like, some moments were more claustrophobic and intimate. I wanted the camera to be closer. These are all happening in the same conversation. So I just shot it over the same conversation. I was covering my ass by shooting the same conversation 4 times. But I was also giving the director and the editor, a more claustrophobic representation of the conversation, a more disconnected representation of the conversation. There's a shot that I haven't got here, but it is there. It's of me, so I'm not gonna put it in the public domain until the short comes out. But it's of me with a 14mm lens right up in my face, and it's like the cut to this when this character is being especially annoying. And it doesn't cover much because it's just that character, it's just him. But like when he's being especially annoying, cut to that. It's this horrible shot. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It's probably the worst recorded footage of me of all time, I think.
So are we saying, how conscious were you of how much you or the camera operator was actually moving around the blocking?
That's the thing. So the blocking, everyone was sat down for this conversation. Everyone was static except for some movements. And then I reckon where coverage falls apart for me is in like dynamic movement. I don't know whether or not to spend the time making a new setup for a movement or just following it with the camera. A lot of my favorite movies follow movement with the camera. I love the way Barton Fink looks. I'm using all the Coen brothers for examples for some reason, or Deacon's examples. I love the way Barton Fink looks. Barton Fink, the camera's always moving, even in small ways. Obviously, they can do it much better. They have like a jib and everything, but But where the coverage falls apart and where I've probably got like the worst shot in the entire scene, I don't know if I have it on my computer yet, but if I need it, I'll find it, is some characters stand up, one character walks towards someone else, and essentially like the operator, I think Wilson was operating for this one. He had to tilt up and follow them, basically, and keep them in an MCU. Because the camera was so close, it was rough. And it looked better when we did the same movement on the longer lens. It was probably just the messiest part of the whole process. That's where I began to fall apart. Like, when the blocking is static, I'm pretty okay at coverage. When there's a lot of movement, I am not. Because I don't know whether to separate it in certain setups. You know? It's a whole conundrum.
All right, so there's a bit to unwrap there.
Yes.
I think
Should we look at the images?
First part I want to look at, before we do that, I think, as we've alluded to before, if you're not finding good solutions, the first place to start looking is asking better questions.
Yeah.
You've set yourself up for a bit of a flaming here with your avatar. Flame on. Why Coen Brothers? Why Roger Deakins when it comes to coverage?
For this particular project, the whole Terry Gilliam look was part of kind of the abrasive tone of the whole thing. It doesn't show up as much in this particular like collection of setups. Only thing I can say is that we kind of used a reverse, like the kind of reverse focal length rule. We used wider lenses for closer shots and longer lenses for further away shots. So you're going to see a bit, like, I think the closer shots of the 24mm, I'm pretty sure. Again,
why?
Oh, why was because of the tone. There was a tonal thing. It was like we liked the way that wide shots looked disconnected if they were done on a long lens, and the way that closer shots looked more stark and like abrasive on a wider lens, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And the Deacon stuff was more lighting.
Yep.
Honestly, the why for the Deacon stuff was logistical stuff. And
also, I guess with that, particularly when it comes to coverage, why the Coen Brothers?
Mostly because, like, again, another one of the like antecedents of that was Barton Fink, and by extension, The Big Lebowski, which are two movies with great dialogue. The Coen Brothers Deacon situation, I really like the fact that those movies had the confidence to cover lengthy conversations that were very, very funny with one shot. Like, it was, you know, there's an exchange in a bowling alley in The Big Lebowski, which doesn't narrow it down, I know. And it's John Goodman and Jeff Bridges, and they're just like, it's just a two-shot, medium shot of both of them. It's like as plain as you can get, and it's great. It's fantastic because the dialogue is so good, and it sits on that for ages. That's it. That's all it is. And I was like, wow, that's fantastic, and also easier. It was a logistical thing as well. It was like that was easier.
I'm kind of trying to figure out whether I'm biased or you're biased. So I'm going to try to allow for both. My bias is hero worship without understanding the why. This is kind of like a more general thing with students and beginners. There have been students in the past where I've like just put my foot down and said, that's it. I don't want to hear. You're not allowed in any of these lessons or any of your assignments to ever mention the name insert XYZ filmmaker.
Yeah. A lot of it is definitely me being like, oh, okay, these are movies that I like. I'm going to emulate it because I like it.
A big part of why that kind of starts raising some red flags for me is that Are you choosing XYZ approach to a scene or a project because it is the most interesting, the best way of going about doing this, or are you doing it because you want to emulate XYZ component or what you like about XYZ hero?
I'd say kind of both.
Yeah.
I have the confidence to say that a lot of my choices, I have enough confidence to say that none of what I chose was inappropriate to emulate. Like tonally, the director and I sat down and were like, how do we want this to feel? And what are movies that we think feel this way? So while I admit that I was a bit hard and fast on the emulation, like I definitely I did a cove light like in the YouTube videos. The closest I did a cove light is what I knew, right? And it's like how it's that look, right? But like it wasn't out of a desire to just emulate him for the sake of emulating him. It was a desire to emulate that particular work because I thought it matched the tone of what we were making.
I think now might be a good time to have a look at the images.
All right. So let me get my epic tech sorted out. Okay. Our first image, now for reference, the way that I shot this conversation, what's happening in the scene is that the main character wants to eavesdrop on two guys in the library, but this psycho who's obsessed with the book that he's pretending to read, like the main character is pretending to read a book so he can like eavesdrop on these other guys. This psycho, played by me, is obsessed with the book that he's reading, which by no coincidence is Dune. It's like a fake version of Dune, but it's Dune. And like won't shut up about it. He just approached him and he won't shut up about this book. And he's talking over the other two guys. It's a whole thing. I wonder where that came from. I wonder what inspired that. Don't pan over there. There's an entire book. There's an entire shelf dedicated to Dune right there. Anyway, so I shot it. There were 5 different shots for this scene.
Rather than trying to preface more, let's have a look at the images.
First image is the worst. This is like the setup that I dislike the most. This is the closer shot of the two guys the main character is trying to eavesdrop on. It was done on a 24mm with a cove light in front of the two of them. That covered the whole conversation. Plus, as that guy stands up, the camera tilts upwards to follow him. I'm pretty happy with this. It's okay. I don't think it serves. I think this is more of a cover your ass shot than it is a making things more interesting shot. However, this is my least favorite of the whole thing. The next shot is the slightly further, like is the wide shot on the longer lens of those two guys. I prefer this one. It just looks better. It is again a bit more of a cover your ass moment, but it just, I'm happy with it because it looks better. It gets slightly more interesting with the main character and the psycho with the book. I've actually got one shot but 2 setups just to show you because the blocking changes here because the guy sits down next to him. There's our initial shot. It's a shot on a 24mm, meant to be kind of MCU. And there's a cove light in front of him. Again, that's more of an emulation because of it's what I know, not because it's something that I think is appropriate. It's just a covering my ass setup. This is the same shot, just blocked differently. There's the psycho. He looks very familiar, doesn't he? He's weirdo. He's a weird guy. Then my favorite shot of the bunch is the wider shot on a longer lens of those two, which covers the same parts of the conversation. I reckon the artistic merits of coverage work better on these two characters because the two shots of them, the 24mm and the, I think, 85 shot of them, those two shots serve 2 different purposes. This one is more disconnected. It's kind of, it feels more like he's a part of the space that he's in. 2 guys are present in it, so you can kind of tell that he's a part of the world. When you're pushed closer into the world of just these 2, it's a lot more claustrophobic and a lot more like they're taking up quite a lot of the frame. That's great. The other 2 guys opposite them, I think the coverage was a lot more cover your ass. And as I said, there was a close-up of this psycho character with a 40mm, but I don't have the mental capacity to present it to you right now. So,
fair enough. It's taken some adjustment for me as well, being on this side of camera just for these podcasts. So totally understandable.
Yeah.
I think we have chosen a side of the camera for a reason, both of us.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to try an experiment.
Yeah.
Can we try to do everything we need to do, everything coverage in 3 minutes, 44 seconds?
Can we?
We'll find out. I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is. But the experiment I am proposing is for the purpose of this vivisection of your coverage.
Yeah.
Can we totally experimentally ban the names Gilliam, Cohen's, and Deacons?
Right. Okay. Cool. That's fine. I explained myself without saying any of those names.
So can we go to I believe it was the first shot you showed me, the one that you were the least happy with. Am I saying that right?
This one.
Yeah. All right. So can we then go to the last shot you showed me?
The one I was happiest with.
So, because interesting thing for me here, kind of looking at the point of like our two kind of dueling priorities in terms of choosing coverage, one story and two cover your ass. Story-wise, out of this shot and the first shot, which feels more like eavesdropping?
Oh, in my opinion, this one. So I've had this discussion before with Brendan because there's been one major issue stylistically that me and the director kind of ran into, is that we really liked for the tone of the sense of humor of this. The sense of humor of this short is very abrasive and like strange, right?
Yep.
And it's about eavesdropping. So me and the director are both in two minds as to whether we want to do He Who Shall Not Be Named's abrasive. Like, we really love that style, the kind of like the kind of crazy looking wider lenses for closer shots. You know, it's a lot more stark and strange. Or this eavesdropping look. So for a lot of my coverage, I've done both because we're kind of the director and I are still undecided as to whether we want this crazy humorous look or the eavesdropping look, you know?
Okay, so story-wise, what's more important?
Probably the eavesdropping look.
Okay. I am of the opinion personally that for me, longer lens and more importantly, longer lens dirty almost feels like looking through binoculars.
Yeah. Why coverage? What's the purpose of coverage? The whole thing. My knowledge is, you know, that division of like, I need different shots of the same scenario for artistic reasons. You know, I need different things to be conveyed by the way that this conversation is being shot and framed and blocked. And if you have all of those things, you have more material to work with. And in a very, very recent conversation we had like 10 minutes ago before it was erased, you mentioned see ya. So,
I know what it is.
Yeah. Covering your ass.
See ya, or
sure
else see ya later.
Exactly, yeah. So those are the two primary tenets of coverage.
I guess when you're first starting out, it can very often feel like the two are at odds.
That's how I feel sometimes. I've got a lot of coverage in some
I
competitions.
feel like maybe This is going to be a little digression. You know the whole saying of you got to learn the rules before you break the rules?
Yep.
I feel like very often these days in teaching creative arts, there is an underlying subconscious approach of let's get through the learning as quick as we can so we can get to the breaking. So it almost kind of feels like sometimes learning the rules, the only purpose of learning the rules is in order to break them.
I've noticed that too. Like a lot of sort of, I like doing it this way, and people say you should, but some people don't. And it's just too much information. It's nice to have a rigid understanding of what needs to be done for at least a little bit of time until we know what we're doing.
It seems like by going about teaching this way, beginners and students don't get the benefits of the rules before they break them.
Yeah. There are a few rules I know that I miss.
Funnily enough, you actually had a really good way of putting it.
Oh, you know what I'm saying?
Of actually yoinking this and going, a former student of mine, Ethan, coined this term.
Nice.
Rules gives you tools.
Oh, yeah. Wow. I didn't know that was a coinable term. I was being a smart ass.
It is.
I was going like,
no,
it
is.
Rules.
Yeah. Rules give you tools to solve problems.
I saw a video a while back. I forget who it was by. If I can figure that out, we should link it so I don't just steal what they had to say with no accreditation. They said that there was, so when you're a sushi chef, you go through years of training before you touch the fish. So the argument here was transplanting that into filmmaking, years of learning basics, a bunch of other things before you try anything massive, or before you even try to be groundbreaking or do something crazy artistically. Just do it the way that it's taught to you over time.
I think this is important, but I think we may have to reshoot the introduction.
Change my camera, by the way. This is my phone. This is my Pixel. I look like a Blair Witch character.
A Blair Fish character hasn't done their apprentice sushi chef. Gee, that was difficult to say.
Oh my God.
Apprentice sushi chef.
That was a hard pun. That was rough.
Yeah, because, well, I'm going to have to sort it out because I do want to talk a little bit about apprentice sushi chefs. Ha! I got it. I feel like we see a similar thing in music, like high level musicianship. So the way I like to talk about it is imagine the lead violin player for the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. At what point in their life do you think they would have first picked up a violin?
Probably when they were quite young, one would imagine.
Give an age.
Let's say 8 o'clock. What? 8 years old? Not 8 o'clock, sorry. Not 8 o'clock.
Initially you would probably have looked at maybe once or twice a week for practice in the first few months, and then if they like it and they start picking up and start getting serious, then you probably start looking at daily practice, right?
Yeah.
By the way, have you ever been given lessons on an instrument?
I learned guitar with a tutor for 5 years, which was nice.
The first few lessons, what were they about?
The absolute basics. Scales, how much pressure to apply to the fretboard, that kind of thing.
Yeah. How long before you played a concert?
Honestly, I only ever played concerts at school, so maybe like three or so years after I started learning guitar, I actually started playing it every now and then at school, like in performances.
So my point there being, where's the equivalent in filmmaking? When you think about the motor skills and the basic understanding of music as a concept in terms of difficulty of attaining those skills, how different is learning to play a guitar from learning filmmaking? In terms of motor skills and understanding the underlying principles.
That's a loaded question. I mean, the motor skills.
My thesis is that it's not very different.
Yeah.
They are different skills, yes, but the level and the complexity to learn them, I personally don't think are that different.
Yeah.
Let's compare how we teach filmmaking to how we teach music. So the first few lessons would be like which hand goes where, which fingers go where, how do you hold the thing, right? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, makes sense.
I played French horn and trombone all through middle school and high school.
Nice.
And the first few weeks of particularly, so I learned the French horn first and then transferred to trombone. The first few weeks of the French horn was just making a sound. And I'm saying sound, I mean noise.
Yeah.
Then progressing to making a sound, and eventually progressing to making notes. So in terms of filmmaking, how familiar on a scale from 1 to 10, being 1 being does not sound familiar at all, and 10 being, yep, that's exactly what it was like. How familiar does this sound? Here's a 3-hour lesson on a JVC camera. Now go and shoot a postcard.
Yeah, that sounds pretty familiar.
Let's take that teaching methodology and put it to music. What's the likelihood that if you go and pay for lessons, let's say guitar, how well is it going to work if we say, here's a 3-hour lesson on a guitar, now go and play a concert on the weekend?
Very badly. It would work out very badly.
So why do we do it that way in terms of teaching filmmaking?
I don't know. I've always gotten the impression that, like, you always hear people talk about how, like, oh, the only way to learn filmmaking is by getting out there and doing it. You know? And I've always had my doubts.
We have spoken about camera operating, right?
Yeah.
And we've done some camera operating exercises.
Yeah.
How many of those skills did you pick up like that?
None of them. I still haven't picked a lot of them up. My Setlegs are terrible.
Yeah. Like, you know, the whole camchi. Do you pick that up like that?
No. Still learning.
So for me, like all the fundamentals, like practicing them over and over is giving you building blocks. It's kind of like Lego.
Yeah.
The creativity isn't in the individual pieces. It's in how you put them together.
Yeah.
So did you play with Legos as a kid? Do you still play with Legos?
Obsessively. Still, every now and then, I've got off my shelf.
So when you received a new kit, freshen the wrapper, tear the plastic up, open up, etc., you know, you get the plans and all that.
Yeah.
How often did you build the kit, the model, whatever it was, according to the plans?
All the time. Every single time.
See, for me,
I was a boring child. I was a very boring kid.
For me, it was the other way around.
Really?
There's very few of the kits that I ever built them according to the plan. Most of the time,
that's very impressive.
Whenever I got a new kit, was that part. Oh, that part will allow me to connect to this part so that I can build the tank I always wanted to build, or whatever didn't exist in Lego. So it's about having that understanding of these blocks and the shapes and how they connect. That for me is what the rules give me. Now, if you only ever build the prescribed kit, then yeah, sure, it can sound boring and uninteresting and unchallenging and uncreative. But for me, the rules are what gives me, you know, is it a corner piece? Is it an angle piece? You know, is it a windshield piece that I can repurpose to a spaceship?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And I feel like in this rush to learn the rules so we can go on to breaking them, we've missed that in general teaching. Whereas other creative art forms like music, they spend years and years and years on understanding those bricks so that they then can go on to build their own sets, their own kits without having to think about how can these possibly connect.
Yeah, I feel like that comes out a lot in some of my short work. Like I have this kind of, this goes here. I've seen it work before, so I'm going to do it. You know, this works like this works like this. I haven't been in many situations where I want actively to break the rules, but like there's definitely an adherence to rules that gives me a lot of comfort and makes it a lot faster for me, you know, as opposed to...
Yeah, and I mean, that's a lot of what rules are for me as well, is taking away decisions up to a point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, I think the purpose of breaking the rules is when the rules are no longer giving you solutions.
Yeah.
So the way I think about it is that rule XYZ has got a range of possible scenarios where it can give you a solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But at a certain point, the situation goes outside of those parameters, and the rule no longer gives you clear-cut decisions. That's, for me, when to break the rules.
Yeah, I agree. That's good.
As in, breaking the rules means having to come up with a different reason for your answer.
I wish I could agree more emphatically, like out of understanding, but because I haven't got a total subconscious understanding of the tool set yet, I haven't had any moments where I've broken the rules and been like, wonderful, a solution, you know? But I understand what you're saying, you know? Like, I agree theoretically, but I haven't put it into practice before.
And this is kind of where I'm at with contemporary teaching of coverage, is that classic continuity coverage has been labeled as boring and too functional, so we're just going to kind of give you the 6 basic rules so that you can go on and break them, rather than understanding what tools do those 6 rules give you.
Yeah.
And I think for me, and this is a question for your generation, really, I guess, is those rules I'm talking about for coverage. What are they?
Oh dear.
So I'm talking classic continuity coverage.
Cover the script. Give the director material to work with.
No. That's the why. That's not the rules.
That's the why. What are the rules?
So think of different shots in your coverage as Lego bricks.
Yep.
The classic continuity style rules are giving you structures for how those bricks will fit together.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, I get what you're saying. It took me a while to cotton onto the analogy, but I understand.
You know how, like, you take a brick and you kind of go, what do you call it in English? Are you calling it humps or dots or...
Studs. I call them studs.
Studs. Okay, we'll go with that. Yeah, you look at a piece and you kind of go, that's how we classify them, right? It's like an 8-stud piece, or it's a 2x4, or it's a 2x2. And by doing so, aren't we kind of labeling them by how can it possibly fit together with another brick?
Yeah, as opposed to...
That's, in my opinion, is what the rules of classic continuity coverage gives me.
Right.
Then it's up to me to decide how am I actually putting them together and what am I making out of the combination of the different bricks.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I can't do that if I don't know the actual connection points.
Yeah. Okay. All right. There's a lot in my brain. Sort of stuff.
So,
very
agreeing with me so far, I'm not sure whether that's out of actual epiphany or out of brain fatigue or just plain old. I'm just going to go along with whatever comes now because GPU memory full.
your GPU memory is full. I just think, you know, I agree, because I think that the way to do things properly comes with, like, with the Lego analogy.
Me as a kid, that was kind of my subconscious breaking the rules.
Yeah.
As in, rather than buy a kit because I wanted the model, I bought a kit because I wanted one specific or two specific or three specific parts.
That's the thing, because it's a good analogy for where I am right now with cinematography and filmmaking. I loved Lego. I didn't build it all the time. I had like a big box of assorted pieces, but I didn't really use them very much. I love getting kits and like building them as instructed.